name is Gail Miller, and I'm Director of Development and Volunteer Services here at Midstate. Our department kind of oversees the coordination of these business advisory council sessions. We're delighted that you were able to attend this morning, and we hope that you really find the topic of great interest to what you do in your normal workday. Before I move on, I just wanted to introduce our Senior Vice President of Operations, Cindy Russo, and then Marianne Goldbringer, who is Vice President of Business Development. Right, it's Senior Vice President. Okay, that's Cindy. I know. That could be a career alternative. No, that's not true.
I know a lot worse.
It's not like that. Before I introduce Bill Cofrancis, who is going to moderate today's session, we have some exciting news, and for many of you, if you haven't started seeing some of our promotion, we will be opening another MediQuick facility in Cheshire, and that opening will be happening on Monday, November 7th. Certainly based on our market research and the fact that Cheshire is one of our primary service areas, it warranted another facility for us. So if you are in need of urgent care, MediQuick services beyond what's available in Meriden, now you'll have another facility in Cheshire.
Yes, the MediQuick does open November 7th, but we do have a sort of grand opening and event on November, and there's information for folks. So,
Yeah.
good.
We were going to make sure that we drew attention to that. There is a grand opening on November 9th, and Joe was going to make reference to it, so on your way out, that you take a flyer. Try to cover all of this. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce, his name is William Cofrancis, but to us he's Bill, or Billy. And Bill is Senior Vice President of PMA Management Corporation of New England. And he might take a moment to describe exactly what the function of your business is. And as I said, he is this morning's moderator.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, especially at Midstate Medical Center, obviously one of the largest employers in Meriden. And we all know in the state of Connecticut, those dominating businesses have been healthcare, municipalities, higher education, and of course, those businesses or those professional organizations in Hartford. Rather than to talk about the economic climate, we're all very familiar with that, but certainly has a direct impact on workers' compensation and the overall feeling of those injured workers. So it's more important today than ever that in fact we do whatever we can to provide those safe environments, and also understand what the employee is dealing with right now. Our firm is a insurance company and a third-party administrator managing the risk for a number of higher education hospitals as well as municipalities throughout the state of Connecticut and of course New England. I'm very pleased to be here today because Midstate Medical Center happens to be one of our customers, and I think what they're doing in terms of bringing this kind of education and especially this distinguished panel to bear, is quite remarkable. It's not every day that an organization who is the provider of services and the taker, if you will, is trying to give back so much. Midstate Medical Center as an employer, and I should put this in perspective for you because it's very important to practice what you preach. They started out with an experienced mod, well over one. They put themselves, they addressed their workers' compensation problem internally here over the years, realizing that they had a number of problems and a number of issues. They also were a number of organizations merging into one, and as a result of that, not only were they spread out throughout the Meriden area, but now one of the largest employers in Meriden, if not the largest employer. So they addressed, they recognized, they understood that they had a problem internally here, and they've done a tremendous job in addressing that, well before this beautiful facility came to bear. So I'm pleased to participate today. I hope I can offer some insight as well from a claims perspective. But most importantly, we have such a great group up here. First, let me introduce His Honor, the Chairman of the Workers' Compensation Commission, Mr. John Mastropietro. I just want to introduce all you guys, but Brian Smith, attorney in the workers' compensation arena, and incidentally, and then of course Sean Gray. Let me just say this incidentally, that by having this group today, we're addressing a couple things. Obviously, by having the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Commission here, you have the ability to hear what's going on, any updates with the workers' compensation situation in the state of Connecticut. We also have legal representation, which obviously is very important, because I know as employers out there, sometimes you can be frustrated with the system, but if you don't in fact understand what's behind it, you may continue that frustration, but hopefully we'll clarify some of those things. And then one of the most important things is the provider. You know, many of you hear about physical therapy, you hear about all these other treatments. Are they going on too long? Are they too little? I think what we need to understand here that the end game, the goal, from a claims payer, from an insurance company standpoint, our goal is always to get that claimant, that employee who's been injured on the job, back to work as quickly as possible and get them back to where they were. They have families, they have obligations, they have responsibilities, and just like you and I, we could have the same problem in an organization, we can injure ourselves. So it's all of our job to understand the various aspects and all of the stakeholders in this. And if you do have any questions today, I'm hoping that we can get all those answered for you. Your Honor, I know you have a busy schedule. Is Brian going to kick it off? Okay. Brian?
He's got another region.
Good morning. Yes, I do. In fact, evidenced by that is that I have top billing over the chairman of the Workers' Comp Commission on this agenda. So
I know where the power lies. With the last case you win.
But I will take this back to the office and make several copies. I'm part of staff legal office for Zurich North America, which means I exclusively represent insureds of Zurich North America. And 100% of my practice is workers' comp defense work. So I travel the state, cover all 8 districts in Connecticut. We attend about over 1,500 hearings per year, 3 attorneys in the office. So we're busy, we're on the road all the time. I tell people, I give them my business card, I said, if you want to know what the traffic is in Connecticut, just call one of us. We'll be able to tell you what's happening. I talked to the chairman briefly about what we might speak about today, and I noticed you mentioned the economy, so I'm here to confirm it's still pretty bad. that hasn't changed. And we talk about its impact on workers' compensation. For me, the good news is when the economy turns bad, turns good, we're still in business. We still attend the same number of hearings. Our caseloads sort of stay the same. Some people assume in a bad economy there'll be more claims. It's kind of a cynical view of it, but the statistics don't really bear that out. What we see at Zurich maybe is increasing reopening of old files. So maybe you have somebody who has lost a job or been laid off, and they have a claim back from the 1980s, and they'll look at it, call their lawyer, and say, oh, maybe I have a chance to enter into a full and final settlement of that claim, might generate some income for me now that I've lost my job. So we do see sort of uptick in those types of files. We also see lots of issues in return to work, and that causes a lot of frustration in the system because, as you mentioned, the whole goal of the system is to get an injured worker back to work, and it benefits all of us in this room when we get those people through the system and back to work. And that sometimes becomes harder. I can tell you I have plenty of cases in my office where people have not gone back to work, and they've been out of work for years. And I think we see, once you get past that, sort of that 1 year mark, and a year and a half, you get into 2 years, now you're at a point where it's not very likely that person's going back to the job they had when they were first initially injured. Try as you might. The state has a job retraining program. Again, because of the economy and because of budgetary issues, sometimes their hands are tied sometimes in their ability to get people retrained. The chairman can probably tell us more about that, but programs still exist, and there are some success stories. So there are resources available for people to get retrained. But there are plenty of people out there who just never return to that first job. I would say when you get into cases involving older workers, there's even less of a chance, I think, that person, if you have a 58-year-old male who's been in the same job his whole life, and he's hurt and he can't go back to that job, it's hard to find a position for that person. And that person becomes frustrated and sometimes less motivated to return to the workforce, and therefore tries to extend his benefits for as long as he can. So those are just a few of my thoughts. I'll maybe ask questions about any of those types of issues before I hand it off to the chairman.
So Sean, before you, move off that, you mentioned a couple things regarding cases reopening. I think all of us as employers, claims administrators, have seen an increase in some of these claims that have been reopening. Some of these employees no longer employed by the organizations, or some of them employed. From your perspective, what should we be doing? Obviously, we have no control over any claim when the employee is no longer working for us and the case has not necessarily been full and finally settled. Is there any recommendations on how we should handle that or how we should address that when those cases reopen? What's the best strategy? How do we, is there ever an opportunity for those people to come back to work? Would we offer them an opportunity to come back? Again, these are what a lot of the employers are faced with in some of the questions that come up every day. Or do we just defend the case as we would?
Typical scenario, the person's probably not an employee. I've had cases maybe 7-8 years out. So the person's no longer an employee. They moved on someplace else. I asked to reopen their file and are asking for a medical evaluation. So the first thing we say to ourselves, well, what's this person been doing for 8 years? So they ask for a hearing. I appear before the Workers' Comp Commissioner and I say, I don't want to authorize an evaluation because I don't know what the person's been doing. I'm going to be beholden to what he goes and tells his doctor about what he has or hasn't been doing. The doctor issues a report that says, well, he's got a new problem and it's related back to your claim. Well, the commissioner is going to say to me, well, the rule in Connecticut is he had a compensable claim 8 years ago. You have no evidence of a new injury, you have to authorize the evaluation. So he ends up going back to the doctor. But what you can do in the interim there is authorize the evaluation and probably either informally or formally take the person's deposition and find out what they've been doing.
That's
Let's go find out what they're doing.
If you have a question with what he's been doing for the 8 years, go find out. Put him under oath.
Go
Do
find
it,
out.
and find out what's going
But
on.
the
Now,
problem
if you come
is-
back and tell me that it isn't.
The commission is so quick to schedule hearings now. I don't have time to get the deposition before he comes before the commissioner and gets approved.
Damned if I do and damned if I don't. It stinks to be me.
But no, you're entitled to find out what's going to happen. You could do an ISO search, see if there's been a new injury, a new claim. I think you can do as much investigating as you possibly can.
I think the point is as you're saying, is working closely with the insurance company, and also in those cases, because it is your dime in some respects, at least with a current employee, you should be talking to the employee. You should be doing some of your own research and investigation. Because if there's already a compensable claim that exists, and just because the employee at that point has returned back to work, that doesn't mean that employee couldn't have exacerbated that injury through something that they did. So I think the key thing here is twofold. If they're not working for you anymore, obviously, and if you get notification of a claim that has been reopened, you need to reach out to the carrier that was on your risk at that particular point in time. If the employee is currently working for you and had an older claim in it, it did get reopened. I think, again, always the approach is to meet with that employee and work them through it and contact, obviously, the insurance company.
So just walk me through this. If I'm an employer and one of my former employees wants to reopen the case, my first step should go to my insurance provider, or should I seek legal counsel, or?
I would say the first thing is to contact, just what you said, contact the carrier who was on the risk for that claim when that
Okay.
person was injured, because then if they need counsel, they can assign counsel for you.
And
because
then
you're
they'll
still
take
covered
over the
under that.
investigation period?
Correct.
And that all comes out of the employer's pocket, or?
Well, it depends on what that policy is. If it's straight insurance, no self-insured, there's no deductible or retention or anything, it would be the insurance company's.
Thank you.
If I could just jump on the way you approach the question, if the employee wants to reopen, the employee's not reopening. The employee has an open case. It's never been closed. All he's doing is revisiting what already exists. There are so many employers who, because it's been out of the mainstream for X number of years, figures it's a done deal, it's closed, and now the employee's coming back in attempting to reopen something, and there's some connotation to that they're looking for something that they're not entitled to. Even insurance company adjusters could never observe, but there are a few out there who, when a claimant would call, would say, oh, your case has been closed. Well, internally, because it's been dormant for so long, it may achieve a closed status within that insurance company's hierarchy. But from the legal perspective, all it is a case that's been dormant, that's always been open. And it's this kind of unfortunate use of verbiage that sometimes sets things well beyond what they need to be. When the claimant calls the Workers' Comp Commission in a panic, I never settled my case. I call the insurance company says it's closed. I call my employer says it's closed. How did it get closed? And we sit there and say, it's not, it's open. Don't worry about it. We'll set it down for a hearing. And everyone comes in, kind of with a chip on their shoulder, why are you doing this? If everyone understood exactly what the nature of the claims were, a lot of this would not be problematic. But because of the way it's approached in the initial stages, it ends up escalating beyond what it needs to be. And it really doesn't have to be that way, but.
That's a very good point. What we should, I don't know if we want to follow up with when a case is closed in terms of the full and final, since we're on that topic. You want to address it?
When the case is closed, you're out of it. Your insurance company has negotiated with them, with the injured worker, and has made a determination that they were going to pay that worker something above and beyond what the law at the time in place in which the closing of the case took place was more than what they were entitled to. They look at what future risk factors are involved, what future exposure is involved. A settlement of a case is nothing more than a business decision. An insurance company is taking a look at what the likelihood of their exposure is over the course of time. All they're saying is if this case remains open and this claimant comes back, I'm potentially exposed to fill in the blank. It's a case-by-case determination. It depends on the individual. And then what they will do is say, if my exposure is, my potential exposure, if the claimant were to hit a home run, is $50,000, then what I'm going to do is offer $25,000 to settle the case. Obviously, I'm just pulling numbers out of the air. What you're not going to be paying them, everything that potentially they could be exposed to. By the same token, you've got to give them something in order for you to relieve from any future liability. It's a business decision. It is contrary to the concept of workers' comp. In terms of a workers' comp case in the state of Connecticut, once a person has been injured, the employer is responsible to that individual for the balance of their lives, so long as whatever occurs somewhere down the road can legitimately be tied to the initial injury. That's a big if. I have people who call me, who come in and have hearings and say, my back is killing me. And it's all because I got hurt when I was 22, and I'm 60. and age had nothing to do with this. My life experiences for the last 40 years had nothing to do with this. It is all because I was hurt when I worked at the packaging factory when I was 22 years old. You sit there and you go, it's maybe a little bit tough, maybe a bit of a stretch. I mean, we need to talk about this. I'm not buying your shtick. The fact of the matter remains, that's the concept behind workers' comp. We talked earlier about what you described as reopening cases, and what I say is simply a claimant coming back saying, I've got an open case, I'm going to explore whether or not there's anything else available for me. The biggest factor to determine at that point, what do you do with that case? Use common sense. How badly was the person hurt initially? And how likely is it that what he's claiming now may be related? If I stub my toe and I'm now complaining that my back hurts, I'm not exactly sure where the nexus is there. But if I had an extremely bad injury to my knee, and at the time in which I hurt my knee, I was told, you know what, you are a knee replacement waiting to happen. Might be 5 years, might be 10 years, might be 15 years, but you're a knee replacement waiting to happen. Well, if that's the history of the case, and now the guy is back saying my knee is killing me, maybe you don't need to do the deposition. Maybe you don't need, you do need to go and have a medical opinion on your own and say, yep, that prediction has come true, he now needs a total knee. You use common sense. You try to figure out what the extent and the nature of the problems were, and then you try to figure out whether it's one of two things happening. Three things happen. Whether it is truly a progression of the problem that is the legitimate responsibility of the employer, because the workers' comp system says you're responsible for everything that comes from that initial injury. Whether it is the claimant in bad economic times attempting to figure out another revenue source that may get him past the moment until times are better, or, and this never ever happens, but occasionally attorneys will recycle files to see what they can squeeze out of old files. Never happens, but I heard tell in other states that on occasion that occurs. And so those are the three reasons why you're going to see something come up. But in workers' compensation, you're responsible. And the settlement full and final that Bill talked about a couple of seconds ago is the exception to the rule. When you settle a case, nothing prohibits you from settling it full and final. But oftentimes people misunderstand what the role of the commission is in that. We, as commissioners, cannot force a settlement. I can't sit there with you and tell you, you pay this amount, and if you don't pay this amount to settle the case, this will be your penalty. Nor can I sit and tell the claimant, you will take this amount, and if you don't take it, this will be the penalty. We have no authority to force that settlement. Our role in a full and final, because it is contrary to the concept of workers' comp, is to review the settlement to determine whether or not it's fair and equitable to both parties. So if you're dealing with a claimant whose car has been repossessed, has received his foreclosure notice because he's delinquent in his mortgage and a variety of other things, and you're looking at a case that legitimately is worth $50,000, and the insurance companies come back and the largest of the insurance company has allowed a settlement figure of $5,000. You might be winning, you're the one, as the commissioner's got to sit there and say, it's not going forward. You're taking advantage of this guy. You know he's got his back to the wall, he'll take anything he can, you're taking advantage of him. On the other side, the guy who's coming in saying, I stubbed my finger, it's got to be worth at least $1 million because I haven't been able to work for 40 years. And you say, well, you know what, here's $10, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully it's enough for gas. So our role is to determine whether or not the settlement is fair and reasonable. We can prevent it from happening, we cannot order it to happen. Does that answer your question?
That certainly does.
But on the topic of settlements, I think we tell clients all the time, the best file is a settled file, because they don't come back to life. You've capped off your wrist, you know what it is, you paid, you closed it. They can't come back to the commission and ask for it to be reopened.
And from the commission's perspective, we are fully supportive of that so long as there is stable medical. If we've got doctor's reports sitting there saying, this is what you're potentially facing in the future, we're that much more reluctant to do that. Because, depending on the age of the person, first of all, we may have Social Security and Medicare coming down on everyone because of the insufficient MSAs that have been put aside in order to handle that. And secondly, you always have the opportunity. There is no private insurance policy out there that does not say that if you have been hurt at work, your group policy does not cover you. Now, to the degree that Anthem decides to exercise that at any given time, Commission's got to be worried someday, at some point, they're going to do that. They exercise their rights to lien the files to be reimbursed from a workers' comp insurer for monies that they may have paid for medical treatment while a case is in the process of being investigated or contested, if it is ultimately determined to be accepted somewhere down the road. But in terms of the ultimate settlement, the one thing that the one overriding concern of the commissioner is when you present for settlement, how stable are you on this? If you're looking at something that says you've got this large potential problem that you're facing in the future, unlikely we're going to allow that settlement to occur.
Again, because they have the obligation to make sure that this person is protected for years going forward. So they have to be very well thought out. We kind of, it's interesting, it's an excellent conversation because we could talk about the state of affairs in workers' comp, we could talk about all these things, but I think hearing it from the chairman himself about what happened from their perspective in dealing with some of these claims is probably more beneficial than most things. I do want to just say something because as we take this from the end of the claim, so to speak, what happens in the beginning when many of you in your organizations, as you come in every single day and you see these hazards that exist, and you've been either reluctant to correct or they haven't been that big of an issue. We're in a healthcare facility right now. There's going to be today alone thousands of moves made in this organization. Patients being transferred, moved from bed to commode, moved from gurney to bed. There's going to be 100 things that are going to happen to them. And us as managers, owners, employees have to be very, very vigilant in terms of recognizing all of those inherent risks. The reason why I say that, because you just heard the chairman himself speak about how long a claim can last. You heard the attorney say that a claim can be potentially open forever. So the issue for us is preventing the claim up front is obviously the most important aspect, and we'll get into that a little later. But while we have you, Your Honor, would you give us an update? His Honor has been practicing law and been in the workers' compensation industry, obviously in the law industry for over 30 years. He was appointed to the Workers' Comp Commission in 1995. He had become chairman in 1999. Since his chairmanship in the office, many changes have taken place for the better, whether it be computer systems, ease and access to hearings on a regular basis, his own rotation of commissioners throughout the state, and as well, we never saw a chairman in so many different locations overseeing and really hearing many, many of the cases.
Moving target to my heart. I learned that early on.
I'm very pleased to have you, Your Honor, with the economic time, with the rising cost of workers' compensation, with the rising cost of medical care. There's so many things that the employers of the state of Connecticut are faced with, and to have you at the helm and be here today to address the group, obviously we're very grateful.
Well, it's my pleasure. The economic situation is driving everything today. And I'd like to tell you that it's other than that, but it isn't. It's driving what the claimants are doing, it's driving what employers are doing, it's driving what the medical providers are doing, it's driving what the insurers are doing. And they're not necessarily all in the right direction. Brian earlier mentioned the fact that oftentimes during these difficult economic times, there's the expectation that there's going to be an increase in the number of claims that are filed. There generally are not an increase in the number of claims that are filed. What there is an increase in the number of hearings that are held on the files that exist, because there are significantly more contests as everyone tries to either maximize their recovery or prevent their payout, whichever the case may be, depending upon your side of the fence. But the fact is that there aren't more claims that are filed, and a lot of that is because most employees in this economic situation are fearful of filing a claim. They're looking at their coworkers having been laid off. They're looking at economic news that indicates that their employer is teetering. There may be a problem. We don't know if we're going to be able to survive. And employers are, and I'm not saying that this is I'm not saying this is a criticism, but employers continually portray the evils of the economy and how bad things are. Well, one of the recipients that's hearing that are the people who are working for you. If you think that's not having an effect on causing fear on their part as to whether or not their job is going to be there tomorrow, then you're living in some state that I'd love to join you, because it doesn't exist any longer. So those people are afraid to file a claim. And for that reason, you see the number of claims drop. However, the interesting part is that when they do get laid off, well, there's no reason for them not to file a claim then, and they do, and then the first thing the employer does is, I never heard anything from you from the time you said it happened until you got the pink slip. Whoa, lo and behold, you get the pink slip. Well, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that wasn't a move to try to subvert the system. It was a guy who was trying to hold on to his job, and when it didn't happen, he said, well, what the hell do I've got to lose? I might as well file a claim. Now the employer is contesting it and goes to Brian and says to Brian, this guy, he was fine right up until the end. Yeah, I saw him limping a little, but hey, everybody limps a little, no problem. But, and then we start the process, and we end up with the fight, and we end up with several hearings that need to take place in order to get to the, just get right back to base zero. I tell claimants, go ahead, file your claim. Understand the nature of what is transpiring, because once that claim is filed, whenever it is, even if it is filed early on in the file time, first thing employers are doing is looking at their experience, they're looking at their costs, they're looking at what it is that their bottom line is suffering each and every month, and they're saying to their employee, but to their insurer, go ahead, you take care of it, which is probably the worst thing they can hear and the worst thing you can do as an employer. If you are an employer and you treat workers' compensation the way you treat your automobile policy, I had a fender bender, I called a 1-800 Geico number, the little whatchamacallit, he answers the phone and says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Gecko, is that what
Gecko,
it is?
yeah.
Little Gecko says, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it for you. And that's it, you've washed your hands of it and you don't hear anything else about it. You treat your workers' compensation policy the same way, and you are going to end up increasing your costs. Because what you've done is not become a partner with your insurer to do what is right. And what is right could be making the payments that this person legitimately should receive, or it could be arguing that this claimant does not deserve these payments. Either way is an appropriate response if there is justification for it. Leaving him out there to kind of determine that information by himself causes the process to be elongated, because if you're not cooperating with him and giving him the information he needs, that means he's got to find it through other sources. It's going to take him longer to do that. His ability to be able to respond to me when he's sitting in front of me and I'm saying, well, Brian, what happened that day? And I say, well, I'm having a little trouble getting that information from my employer. And I'm saying, well, that's kind of your problem on your side of the table, so that kind of a situation causes your costs to go up. If you contest it when you shouldn't be contesting it, because there's no reason to contest it. I had one 2 weeks ago. The guy fell in front of 10 co-employees. Clearly, he was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was supposed to be at the time he was supposed to be doing it. And the employer submitted a denial. Okay? Based on what? And then you have the person come in and says, well, I'm not sure that that was the response. I said, well, I've taken a look at the law books. I'm not quite sure that kind of rises to the level where you've met your burden. You might want to think about it again. It was, if you think you're just going to submit it and it's going to go away, if you think you're going to ignore it and it's going to go away, it isn't. What you're doing is prolonging the situation. This person is going to end up on indemnity for a period of time unnecessarily. That complicates everything. Because if he hasn't gotten to the doctor and he hasn't started the physical therapy that he needs, that's just going to prolong. If he needed 6 visits of physical therapy, but he doesn't get to see the doctor for 90 days, now he's going to need 18 visits of physical therapy to make up for the time that he's been sitting watching Oprah instead of doing what it is that he was supposed to do. And while he was watching Oprah, you were paying him to do that. Not a bad shtick. Why do you want to put yourself in that kind of a situation? So the economy is driving the degree of contest, where contest does not need to happen. And it does, however, cause you or an employer to be looked at suspiciously if everything that comes through you contest. When you have the legitimate contest, everybody's sitting around saying, oh yeah, we know them, they contest everything. You build up a reputation. You need to watch how you do that also. The insurance company is attempting to protect its bottom line. You look at what is happening right now, and I know the setting we're in, so the lightning is probably going to start in a second or so. But if you look at the increased costs associated with workers' compensation, this much of the increase is associated with indemnity, and this much of the increase is associated with medical. That's just the way it is. All of a sudden, there have been an explosion of the number of office visits that the average person needs to see the doctor. Now, there may be an argument made that if, when layoffs occur, the last one that was the first one gone, so the younger person is usually the one who leaves, so the one who's left to get hurt is the older person. You know, as Bill described all of my history, which is another way of saying how old I am, and I appreciate that deeply. See if you win another case. But the older person is going to take a little bit longer to heal than the younger person. So that may account for some of it. But there are those who might be cynical. Certainly not I. But there will be those who might be cynical. And maybe looking at some of the doctors out there, the providers out there, who are being pinched because of the decrease in their reimbursement in just about every other arena, and seeing a way to make their bottom line appreciate as a result of workers' comp, where we've kept our fees static. So by comparison to the reductions they've received, we look pretty good. And so as a result of that, those who are more cynical in nature might suggest that those office visits are somewhat unnecessary, but are increasing the bottom line. You also are looking at a significant increase in the number of spinal fusions that are taking place. Why? Beats the hell out of me, because all of the medical evidence indicates that the fusions are nowhere near as successful or beneficial as when the surgeries were originally came about 25 years ago. The history for the last 25 years has shown they just aren't doing what it is that everyone hoped they would do. Yet we have this explosion. There are doctors out there, as soon as the person walks in, say, oh, you're going to need a fusion 2-level instrumentation, the whole routine. So, you got to take my shirt off first. Trying to open the file, want to know my name, something, a little something. No, you need the surgery. It is the reality of the situation. You have economy driving this. There's ways to deal with it, and the ways to deal with it is to utilize common sense. Fight where you need to fight. Throw the towel in, and I don't mean that in a defeatist way. I mean recognize where your liabilities lie and accept your liabilities, and recognize where to fight and fight for those that you need to fight for. It will work out in the end. But playing the game of doing it for the sake of doing it, when you are finished, you are still going to pay. Whether you're paying the claimant, or whether you're paying through an increase in your experience and therefore your insurance rates, either he's going to benefit or the claimant is going to benefit. But you're the ones who are going to end up paying the price for that as employers if you don't approach it in a common sense and aggressive manner. It is not a difficult concept, but it is so overlooked by people who are otherwise have so many things on their plate that workers' comp, if I can get rid of it, I'll get rid of it. The ability to return people back to work. He could do the greatest job in the world. The fact of the matter remains, if you're not bringing them back, no matter how well he gets them physically, they're not getting back. And that's another aspect of what's happening. Too many employers out there who are sitting there saying that if the situation is such that I can get this person who just got hurt on comp, and I don't need to have this person on my payroll any longer, but I don't get the black mark of having laid him off. I just don't have to bring him back because he got hurt. Develop that kind of attitude. Your experience is going to go up for the amount of money that's going to be paid in discretionary benefits to this person while he's out there looking for jobs that don't exist. Probably hasn't been around to see Dr. Costas yet. Get back to where it goes. Morning, Jonathan. How are you? Yes, sir.
I'd like to, as an employer, find out what input, if Sean could answer, I would have on the rehabilitation of one of my employees. Could I get involved, and what is your profession doing to address the cost factor?
Well, I think there's a number of things that you can look at as employers. You can look at addressing. I think what John mentioned, there's a few things that the economy is driving some decisions that employers are making. I would say from our perspective, I think we've seen a decrease in our pre-employment screens, or people aren't hiring as much anymore. Some of our larger employers have cut down on their hiring as well. But I've also seen some of our bigger employers that we work closely with, they're cutting back some of their preventative measures as well. So some of the preventative measures, maybe ergonomics, maybe a team having specialists on site that will look at workstations or lifting or kind of the higher risk jobs that they might have. They're cutting back on some of those things, but they're looking at where can we trim to salary costs. So I think from my perspective, that's where we come in. We're seeing these patients in outpatient, in our outpatient setting when they've already had an injury, and that's when I think the ball's already, the cart's a little bit. Milk has already spilled at that point. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And from the rehab perspective, when we do see these patients that come in, they have an injury, they've seen the physician and say, you know what, this is what's going on. Sometimes it might not be early enough. And if we have an employee that's out on leave, I think we advocate for light duty as quickly. Don't let them stay out of work. Get them back in. Get them in a safe environment. Have them doing something that they can do safely, which is within their limitations. What the physician might have already kind of acknowledged what they can do. Safe lifting, safe sitting restriction. Any of the restrictions, kind of looking at those and trying to do something like duty for those individuals. The other piece that I think is getting more and more as we look at streamlining healthcare and healthcare costs, and we understand healthcare costs are huge, and as a system, Hartford Healthcare, we're working at trying to streamline those costs, provide the best care and the best practices to get people better, quicker, and really kind of streamline that intervention. So teamwork, team approach to that care I think is very crucial. Having specific relationships with the physicians that are seeing these patients initially, and developing a team approach of what interventions are the most effective and for this person. Where we come into play, I think not only do we look at the acute injury, but we're also looking at their mechanics. We're looking at their job, what they need to do at their job, and can they physically perform that job consistently. I think those recommendations with the physician's input as well is, I think, is important piece on getting back to work and getting them safely back to work. Retraining is one of the questions that came up. Definitely, if those thoughts are part of the plan with the employer on retraining, what types of activities is that employee going to be doing is very crucial for us, because as therapists, we're not only working on acute injuries, but we're educating. We're training them, proper lifting, proper sitting, modifications of what they need to do to be safe in what they do. We recognize as well that somebody that comes in that's 58 years old, that comes in and has a back injury from doing their job, we understand that a back injury isn't just it can be a sudden event, but also there's cumulative factors over the years, and we take all that into consideration. But when they leave our clinic or our care, they need to understand things that are going to continue to make that worse or continue to make that better. And that needs to take place not only in the clinic, at home, but also in the workplace. So I think it's an educational piece as well.
Chairman, you pointed out, I really like what you said, there's a contest and then we can contest. I like that in terms of what you're seeing right now, which is helping to drive some of the animosity, some of the cause, some of the displeasure with the system. As an insurance company, a third-party administrator, we don't always have that information on a timely basis to determine compensability, investigate a claim. Medicals will come in, people will be on the track, regardless of whether they're in a managed care plan or not. But help the employers out there better understand how to reduce that animosity and that contest by paying that employee for that medical care that you've indicated, for the initial care, maybe without prejudice. Help us understand that so that when we do make these payments as insurance companies or third-party administrators, that we are doing it is in good faith, and it is also during that period of time in which we have an opportunity to investigate and determine really causality, compensability, et cetera. So,
If I can give you one piece of information that is going to make your lives easier and is going to save you money over the long term, it's communicating. It's simple as that. It's communicating. Put yourself in the position of the injured worker. Person comes in and he says he's hurt. And if you've approached it as I made the allusion or the analogy earlier to your car insurance, and what your response to that injured worker is, call the insurance company. There's a placard by the water cooler, the number's on there, call the insurance company. The first thing you've told that employee is, I can't be bothered with you. You just got hurt. You were important to me 10 minutes ago, but right now you're a problem. See you later, go take care of it. Throw you on the heap because you've been injured and you are less of an asset to me than you were a few minutes ago. If instead you approached it differently and helped that person make the contact, you didn't make it appear as if he was on his own, you have already stopped the fear factor from rising, which then automatically turns to animosity. So when you've raised the fear factor and they call the insurance company, if they call Zurich, Brian calls back within 20 minutes, guaranteed it's in his contract. However, there are other folks out there where the phone call goes to the voicemail and that injured worker doesn't get a call back for who knows how long. Now the guy is starting to panic. My employer isn't talking to me. He tells me to get my information from someone else. I call that someone else, and that someone else is not returning my call. This goes on for a few. First of all, he's not getting the treatment he needs. He's not even being analyzed to determine what treatment he needs, let alone whether or not he needs it and if he's getting it. He's not getting any income. It goes on for 2 or 3 weeks. You're on his back about, well, are you coming back? And he's on his back saying, well, I haven't heard. You haven't picked up the phone and called the adjuster and said, what am I paying premiums for? Why is this guy sitting home and you're not doing anything? Instead, you've taken the automobile approach. I've done my part. I sent in the first report of injury. It's their problem. They'll take care of it from there. Now the guy starts to panic. What's he do? He goes and hires an attorney. Why? Because he doesn't know what else to do. So what's the employer do? As soon as the attorney gets in, everything gets complicated. Well, you could have prevented it to start with if you had given him the access that he needed in order to get his questions answered. So communication is extremely important. Then when you move to the next step, Bill is absolutely correct. You need to look at it from the perspective of that initial injury. At that stage, no one knows anything other than what the claimant is telling us. Even if it's been witnessed, we don't know the extent of the problem that the person has experienced. You're not qualified to make that determination. I'm not qualified to make that determination. A doctor needs to make that determination. And so going and allowing that to occur in the first instance, at the very least, to get a picture of what we're facing, is only helping you, because if you wait 6 weeks to get in front of me, I'm only going to order it anyway. Because what else can we do until we get a picture of whether or not a problem even exists? So it's going to happen. Why pay them 6 weeks of indemnity until you get in for me to say, yep, go ahead and do it? Yet there will be adjusters, because their employers are on their case, who will do just that. Why? Because you've taken the attitude that you want to fight everything. That adjuster will adopt that attitude, and then they will end up getting ordered by me, but will have the comfort of coming back to you and saying, it wasn't me, it was that SOP commissioner, he's the one who made me do it.
Well, with that, the longer you wait, and studies have shown that the longer you wait to get that intervention that that employee needs, the more cost could be associated with that. Because if their habits if they have poor habits, and they're going to continue those habits while they're out. And if they don't have the care that they need to stop some bad habits or to progress an injury to make it worse, then there's some other complications that can happen from that. So your medical costs could go up on that. So.
And the mindset, not the physical, but just the mental part of it too. Because he's sitting there saying, well, if that's the way my employer treated me, I'll show him. I'll sit home and watch over for another couple of weeks. It's that kind of a situation. Tit for tat. I'll do this. People don't understand. They talk about having problems with the workers' compensation system. I hear this all the time. And they don't understand what the role of the Compensation Commission is, as opposed to the system as a whole. We get phone calls all the time from legislators, God help us, saying, how come my constituent hasn't received their check? I say, I don't know. Next time I write out a check, it'll be the first one. And we don't do that. I don't have no clue. I don't know why that is the case. So you say, why don't you call Brian? He'll run it through the system and find out why, maybe something fell off the radar, maybe the guy doesn't deserve a check. I don't know, but I haven't a clue. Well, why don't you know that? It's your responsibility. No, it's not my responsibility. Then I go and pull it up on the computer and I say, what is it now? John Smith, your brother. John Smith versus, the XYZ Corporation, that's the case. And I pull it up and I say, I've got no John Smith, I've got no XYZ Corporation. I have no idea what you're talking about, Mr. State Representative, or Mr. whomever. I said, what do you mean you have no idea? I said, do you understand what our role is? Our role is the court system. If you have a dispute with your neighbor over a boundary line, and you never file suit in court, would you call your local court to ask them why your neighbor isn't doing what it is that your neighbor's supposed to do? Because the court's going to say to you, how would I know? Nobody filed a suit. I have no clue what you're talking about. If all of these things are happening and no one files a claim with the Workers' Compensation Commission, we're not even involved in this. We don't even know you exist. We only become involved at the point in which a contest arises that cannot be resolved between the people. The problem with that is that could be very late in the system. That could be 6 or 7 months later. We get the blame for that, by the way. It took 7 months for me to get a check. Yeah, but you made the claim last week and I had you in this week. I ordered the check and within 10 days of me hearing about it, you got it. The fact that you didn't tell me about it for 7 months, how the hell was I supposed to figure out you needed it if you never gave me a clue that this was necessary? But that's just from a monetary point of view. From the physical point of view, if I'm ordering that physical therapy 7 months down the road because you guys have been arguing along the way, and I am now coming back at this stage of the game 7 months down the road saying, okay, let's put this in reverse, go right back to the beginning and start all over again, well, it's going to take that much longer for that person to be able to reach what he could have been had he started to receive the physical therapy on day 2 or 3, as opposed to 7 months down the road. And I'm just picking up physical therapy. Thank you. I know how to play to my counterparts.
I don't know, John, you're pretty tough on this one. In an effort to keep everybody on a time frame, and I know the chairman has to head to he has to go to his Waterbury office today to preside over cases.
Yeah, I'm okay. There are things that I think they said if they wanted to ask questions or whatever, I'm okay till at least 9.
Okay, great, because we do have some questions that people have given me. I have a few for you, but why don't we open that up? Joe, I think it's a good time if anybody has any questions for any of the panelists.
Okay, thanks for stopping by.
So I'm going to ask some of the ones that people have asked me to ask for you. With the budget cuts in the state of Connecticut taking place and have taken place, what kind of impact has that had on your on your commission? And do you now have any additional responsibilities that your department is responsible for?
Significant and yes.
Okay.
Let me make it easy. Nothing that should affect you. We have experienced significant financial downsizing and significant reduction in the number of our personnel. We have not been given permission to rehire individuals. So we are at a critical stage. But what that has done for me is to have to cause the priorities to be addressed by virtue of need. Our first and foremost, for the whole diatribe I just went through about at the point in which we get to know what's happening, we're an adjudicative agency. That's our job. We provide the forum for people to resolve their disputes. So what that means is many other areas in the workers' compensation system that I am responsible for, I have dragged resources from there to put them to the adjudicative function. So if I've done things, hopefully, well enough, you as employers, you as physicians, you as injured workers should not see any of the difficulties that I will experience in workers' comp. There will be other people who are filing for self-insurance, who are filing for managed care plans, or a variety of different administrative things that I've needed to do where I've had to pull people away from that to devote it to the area that is most crucial to our operation. There you're going to hear, there are going to be some gripes, but they shouldn't be affecting you. You guys should be fine. My problems are with other folks not in this room.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the panel will be around, I guess, for a few minutes if you have any questions. I want to thank you. I think you guys did a great job. I really appreciate you coming out. I do want to mention on the back table, there's some notices. One is a showcase of showcase of work that's being done around the hospital. It's October 27th. Please take a notice. If you can join us, that would be great. The MediQuick is opening. There's going to be an open house November 4th. Again, the notice is in the back. Please take it. Both of these events are November 9th. I'm looking at the 9th and I said the 4th. Okay. Anyway, moving right along. And that's, of course, in Cheshire. All right? There you go. Okay, good. And there's other notices back there, so please help yourself. Thank you for coming out. If you have any questions, we'll be here and appreciate it. We'll see you in the spring.
Thank you.